Good afternoon, Erev Shabbat Kodesh, Erev Sukkah, Chag Sameach. We're sitting in the Sukkah. Maybe I should give you a little roundabout here. Get an idea of our little Sukkah here. And it's such a pleasure to stop working. The end of a week, it seems like the end of a year, the end of many years, many cycles have gone before us. And you know, I heard a word from a pretty well-known and respected rabbi here in Jerusalem. He says that we need prophecy. We need prophecy. Before we need Mashiach, before we need all the other big Jewish dreams, we need the prophetic institution, the power of perceiving God's will ahead of time and being able to speak it into words. Why? What's going to happen? God tells Yeshua, for the sake of your grandchildren, I'm doing this miracle, said that you will tell your children and your grandchildren what God did for you when you came out of Egypt, when you came into the land. He made the waters of the Jordan stand up. Now, if you read closely to the description, it was standing off quite a bit of ways. It wasn't like you were a couple of feet away from this wall of water that the Midrash says was a kilometer high, which meant you could see it from space. But rather, the actual text says it was a distance off, like the nearest town. The water was gathering up. This big mitzvah to bring the Jews into the land. And God even said to Yeshua, I'm going to do it for you to make you great in the eyes of the people. Now, Yeshua had spent his entire life, which was at least, well, Moses died at 120, and now Yeshua had to be close to 100 years old. And he said, to make you great in the eyes of the people. Why does Yeshua need to be great in the eyes of the people? Because otherwise, if they're not going to really respect you, because there's a lot of days and weeks and months ahead of this journey, this redemption, this trip into a foreign land, a wild wilderness, called the land of Israel, the land of Canaan at the time. The name Israel didn't even exist. Didn't exist until Jacob, well, existed in the name of a person, but not in the name of a nation. And so God is going to do the miracle in order to make the man great, in order that the people will believe in the man, in order that they'll do what he tells them to do, in order that they actually follow God's will on this journey. I've taught school a little bit. You've got some tough classes where the kids just don't want to do what you want them to do. I'd say you try to be clever, you try to be funny, you try to be firm, you try to be stern, you try to do a lot of things to get those kids to listen, to make the class work, to make the material worth giving over. But here we're talking about a little different material than third grade math or physical education, teaching kids how to bounce basketballs. We're talking about God wants the Jewish people to know his laws. It's like suddenly he took 3 million people and he said, you guys are going to law school. The entire nation is going to go to God's law school. And you're going to learn all these metaphysical and proto-physical concepts, which just means beyond the physical. And you're going to learn very physical things as well. How to take care of this land, how to let the land rest, how to give your produce to the poor and to the Kohanim, etc., etc. God is giving this great book through Moses and Yeshua in order that the people follow it, but he has to do miracles to convince the people that Yeshua is just not making this up. That Moses wasn't just coming down with a few nice verses of poetry to convince them. How hard-headed are these people? Now, at this point in the story, remember, it's already 40 years of wandering in the desert since the great mitzvah of the splitting of the sea. But let's link this back to our generation. This rabbi said we need the miracles again because we need to believe again and because we need to do the words of the Torah again. Why? Why is God so stuck on it? You're hard-necked people, you're stubborn, you're rebellious, you're angry, you're treacherous, whatever words that are used to describe the Jews when they're not on their good self. Why is God so dedicated to us? For the sake of your children and your children's children, it said, you will tell them in their ears. In other words, you'll make sure they're listening and their phone is off. And they're going to hear the words, the ma'an, for the sake of the future, because better people than that generation are going to come along. Now, that's a hard thing to say, but they spent 40 years in the desert after seeing all the miracles. They were, can you imagine? Seeing all the miracles, and then you're just denying your reality? So, the foresight of God into the generations to come, a piece of that, it gets transferred into the mind of the prophet, in this case Joshua, in order that he understands why God is making him great to do this miracle of stopping the Jordan River in its tracks to let the 3.2 million people cross the muddy banks and get to the other side. And then on top of it, he tells Joshua to pick 12 men that will each take a stone from under where the Ark of the Covenant stood on its wagon in the middle of the river. Take 12 stones out of there, and those stones are going to be kept as evidence, as witnesses of the miracle that was done there. Over and over, we need to be reinvigorated with faith in the miracle itself, because everything looks so commonplace. But when you look at your finger and you cut it and then it heals, isn't that miraculous? Did all those little cells get together and say, we got a problem, we got a breach, we got to close the gap in Avraham's finger because, what's flying around out there, we don't want to swim inside. That's a miracle. We just don't see it as a miracle because science, what it does is it makes us believe that natural processes are not touched by a divine cause, by a divine wisdom behind the natural processes that your finger heals. But if you saw the miracle in your finger healing, you would see it's no bigger deal than to stop the Jordan River. Especially now, it's not that big a river, but still, it's not about the size of the river. It's about the idea that God controls the process that he created. So there's nothing, as we say in Hebrew, hefker. There's nothing ownerless. Nothing happens without there being a proper cause and effect relationship from the top of the pyramid all the way down to the bottom. And Rebbe Nachman steps forward and says the sukkah that we're going to sit in tonight is the aspect of divine inspiration. And divine inspiration is a spark of prophecy. In other words, it's because each person has their own psychic filter, their own camera in their head that records, but not just records reality with a memory, but projects into reality, both backwards and forwards in time. So this rabbi was telling us, folks, we need the miracle in order to believe. And people say, well, I don't have enough faith to believe in the miracle. No, you don't deserve the miracle, Joshua and Moses. I'm doing it for the future. I'm doing it for my name. I'm doing it not for my glory, but because I promised Abraham and Isaac, and I'm going to make good on my promise no matter what. And Jacob got a promise too. So you see, the way we think it from the physical world into the spiritual it creates problems with the simplicity of seeing everything as a miracle. But when you see the world from the inside out, then everything is miraculous, really. How does the, that eucalyptus tree over there is a good friend of mine. I planted it about 32 years old, and he's gone through a lot already. Windstorms and kids with knives and lots of crows. They don't, they kind of take advantage of his branches. That tree, I feel that tree is alive and animated with a life force and a spirit. You think I'm crazy? Well, you can. I don't think it's crazy. I think everything is like that. We just don't see it because we don't see it from the inside out. We see it from the outside in. And the sukkah is the time we get to jump out of that old-fashioned way of looking at it, that physically materialized way of seeing reality, and we get to jump out of it and look from the inside out and see that it's all miraculous. And I can join the miracle instead of fighting it or looking for proof to it or trying to find the logic behind it. So my wonderful wife has been working all day to make the sukkah beautiful, as you see, and we are really watching the sky get darker, so I've got to say goodbye. But that's what the sukkah is about, folks. Turning the view of the world inside out, that we see it as all a miracle. And that's how the forefathers saw it, and that's how the prophets see it. And that's what they're trying to impart to us. And when we see that, we'll understand why that rabbi said we need to have that power of the miracle to get us to see the miracle from the right perspective, and then we can change reality. And of course, the reality that we want to change, we don't want to make it better than God made it. He already made it perfect. We just want to see it right, so we all, like those Jews in the desert for 40 years, will start getting it right, stop fighting, get along, and create the divine nation that we are, the divine vision that we were given, and that the whole world should be imbued with that spirit. Hag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you hopefully after Shabbat, and then all week long during this great festival, there will be more interesting things to share. God bless you all.